Is going to be a special situation. We're going to actually try to record this, create a YouTube eventually and a link that we can post this for folks. So for you guys that have not seen the presentation, we're not going to miss anything here, but if you see me talking to folks out on the camera, they know what we're talking about here. All right, so my name is Bob Federico. I am the chairman of the Eastwood Incorporation Committee. And the Eastwood Incorporation Committee, for the most part, is a group of folks that got together, originally part of the Eastwood Village Council. So I don't know how many people know what the Eastwood Village Council is, but if you don't, it's an advocacy group, tough word. And the intent is to try to keep a line of communication between the community and downtown. So if there's new developments that are initiated, we would try to get involved, try to get as much information as we could, and try to get that information out to you, the public. So examples, very quickly, of some of the things we've been involved with. The turn lanes on Johnson Road is an example. About 3 or 4 years ago, if you came up toward Johnson Road and you went up the hill and you made the sweeping turn by the firehouse, and you weren't paying attention, somebody was making a left-hand turn, you were going to get a rear ender right there. I think we led the league in rear end collisions at that intersection. So we got some turn lanes. When Publix came to town, well, before they did, they contacted us and they asked, they wanted to be good corporate citizens, wanted our opinion. We went to most of the subdivisions in the immediate area and asked the folks, Publix is looking to come in here. Are you guys in agreement with that? And the option really was, it's C1 property. It can either be a 4-story apartment or it could be a Publix. And that made that decision pretty easy for the folks that lived here. So we got involved with that. And we've also been involved, everybody knows the intersection in front of the firehouse, the Eastwood Cutoff, US 60 intersection. I don't think anybody would question one of the most dangerous intersections in Louisville. But we've been involved with that, the Eastwood Village Council and now us, probably since 2017. We finally got a plan to restructure it. It's funded, so now it's just a matter of implementing. So somewhere in the 2026 timeframe, we expect to see that happen. Okay, so that gives you a little bit of background on who the committee members are. We are not politicians, so just make sure we get that disclaimer in there. And we have no financial interest in this project whatsoever. The only interest we have financially is that it's costing us a lot of money out of our pockets. That's the honest. We don't have the deep pockets that our opposition does. And if anybody knows who the opposite or doesn't know who they are, you see those great big signs that say don't pay the big bad tax, okay? And you notice that those signs are all put up next to developers' properties up on Aiken Road. That's where it all started. The developing community obviously doesn't want us to do this, and I'll explain why in a few. They've hired a very prestigious PR firm here in Louisville. They're expensive, they got deep pockets, we don't, but that's who the opposition is, okay? So kind of level set you on everything. So let's go through the presentation. I get yelled at every time I turn around, but I'm old, so I forget my stuff here on my notes. So the first thing I want to ask is, does anybody know how many cities there are in Louisville? Anybody know how many cities there are in Louisville?
26?
No. There are actually 82 cities within Louisville. 82 individual cities. They're also referred to as taxing districts, and we're going to talk about taxing districts. Of those 82 cities, 12 have zoning authority. Okay? 12 have zoning authority, and that's a big deal. We're going to talk a lot about zoning authority. Does anybody know how much administrative or legislative authority we as an unincorporated area have today?
None.
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 That is right, none. We have 0. Okay? A home rule city with zoning authority has a whole nother level of authority that we currently do not have. Okay, those 12 cities are J-Town, Middletown, Anchorage, Linden, Shively, Douglas Hills. So those are just examples of some of the cities with zoning. Prospect. Okay, so those are the cities with zoning authority. So what does that mean? Let's put this down over here. These are our cities. Anybody know what the Land Development Code is? Land Development Code? So the Land Development Code, LDC, is a set of rules and regulations which include zoning that defines how land can be used, how a development such as a new warehouse or home addition must be designed, and the procedures for obtaining approvals. So the best way to say what the land development code is, picture a great big book. It's this thick, it's 1,000 pages, and it has a whole bunch of rules and regulations that developers have to abide by, minimum code, in order to present a plan to Louisville Metro, okay? Louisville Metro has its own land development code, okay? And everybody that lives within Louisville Metro who is not a home rule city, basically anybody who's unincorporated, follows the rules of Louisville Metro's land development code. If you are a home rule city, you get to have your own land development code. And by state statute, your land development code doesn't have to match Louisville's land development code. Important distinction. Okay, so when I give this presentation, a lot of times people will come up and they'll say, it sounds great, but you really don't have any authority to do anything. You say, well, let's take a look at the city of Middletown as an example. Everybody know about short-term rentals. The ability to rent your property for X period of time, then do it again with somebody else and do it. Those short-term rentals. Short-term rentals was an amendment to Louisville's land development code, okay? When that amendment was passed, it rippled down to all of the unincorporated areas. So anybody who lives in an unincorporated area or in Louisville Metro abides by the laws of allowing short-term rentals. Middletown, City of Middletown, with their zoning authority, basically said, you know what? We're gonna adopt those changes to the amendments to our land development code, but with an exception. We will not allow short-term rentals within R1, R2, R3, R4, or R5 zone properties. Okay, real simple. They said, we're gonna adopt your change, but with these restrictions, because they had the right to do that. City of St. Matthews, ordinance number 22-02, did the same thing. Only they wrote it and said, we will adopt Louisville Metro's amendment for short-term rentals with the exception of, and they wrote a book, okay, of all the things that you can't do because of their land development code. Prospect. So the city of Prospect, they started talking about factory-built housing. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. But factory-built housing. So within Prospect's land development code, section 4.1.2, it says the land development code is not adopted by the city of Prospect. Factory-built housing may not be placed on any lot within the city of Prospect. So even though Louisville Metro said you could, because they have their own land development code, they chose to say no. Prospect again, somebody came up to them and said, hey, we want to build a mini warehouse in the city of Prospect. And the city of Prospect governing body said, well, that's really great, except according to our land development code, you can't build a mini warehouse within the city limits of Prospect. So they said, you can't. And probably one of the most high profile ones is, here's a picture, and everything that I'm going to tell you guys tonight is coming from a document, from a magazine, from Louisville Metro, from government. It's not anything we're making up, just to make sure everybody understands. So here's an example where Metro Panel takes up rezoning plan for controversial St. Matthews apartment complex. It's a biggie. This is by a company called LDG. LDG we will talk about a lot tonight. They are one of the nation's biggest developers of apartment complexes in the country. They are also located here in Louisville. Why do I bring this up? Go through this whole article. The most important part about it is it says at the end, the Land Development and Transportation Committee will decide whether to advance LDG's request to a full hearing of the Planning Commission. In turn, the Planning Commission would vote whether to recommend the zoning change. Now, in today's world, if you were not incorporated, that decision would go to Louisville Metro Council. That's a zoning change. They would have to approve it. But because St. Matthews has zoning authority, that final decision, and it says, instead of the Metro Council, the St. Matthews City Council will have the final say on that request. That's a big deal, okay? So, if anybody tells you that becoming a home rule city and having zoning authority doesn't buy you anything, I would strongly disagree with that statement. If you want to know for sure, go to LouisvilleKY.gov, go to the website, And on the website, you can simply query LDCs for cities with zoning authority. And it'll literally take you to every single home rule city and every amendment, text amendment or map amendment that has been submitted through the years. And you'll see there's quite a bit. Okay. Any question about that stuff so far? All right, what that means. Okay, the next thing we're gonna do, we're gonna talk about some of the things that are going on in this area, just to get everybody up to speed. For example, everybody know where Locust Creek is? Everybody know where Notting Hills is? Okay. Right in between Locust Creek and Notting Hills is a piece of property. Right there. 26 acres. And we refer to it as the Sweeney property. It was originally owned by Dr. Sweeney and then his son. Now, that property was sold. And there's been some question as to whether or not it actually has transferred money. So we went to Bobby Holscoe's Jefferson County Clerk's office to confirm the money's changed hands. That property is now owned by Hagen Properties. Everybody know who Hagen Properties are? Hagen Properties, you think about the apartments over there by Target in Middletown? Okay, so in between Locust Creek and Notting Hills, 26 acres, those 26 acres are scheduled to become 380 apartments from Hagen. Okay. Directly across the street from that piece of property, there's 14 acres. There's 14 acres. And there's the commercial listing. You won't find this as a private listing. This is a commercial listing for 14.5 acres. And on the brochure, it says possible density in the range of 230 apartments if rezoned. Okay, so that means you got apartments to the north, you got apartments to the south. So far we're up to what? Almost 600 apartments. Now let's look right over here. So everybody know where Shelbyville Road is. Clark Station, just go south a little bit. You find this nice piece of property right here. It's 716 Clark Station. Another commercial property. 92 acres. And what's the plan? Go to the back of this listing and we find a plan for 290 homes. I mean, they're already talking about what they could do with that property. Now here comes one of the big ones. Remember we talked about LDG? LDG, one of the biggest nation builders of housing complexes, 3-4 story apartment complexes. LDG right here owns 84 acres. Again, there's Locust Creek, there's Notting Hill, Shelbyville Road, a stone's throw, 84 acres. LDG has proposed to build a 750 apartment unit complex in Prospect. It's not actually in Prospect. Does everybody know where the Prospect Kroger's is? Hey, Prospect Kroger's. If you're standing at the Prospect Kroger's and you look across the street, you see the gas station for the Kroger's, that's actually not in Prospect. The city line is right there in the street. So the property that they bought, LDG, is just outside the city limits of Prospect. They're proposing to build 750 unit apartment complex, 4 stories, right there on 11 acres. So can you imagine what they could do on 84 acres? Do the math, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000? Okay, so now, I know I've been picking on all these folks right here. Well, let's go take a ride. We're gonna get on Flat Rock. Everybody know where Flat Rock is? We're gonna get up, we're gonna drive north, we're gonna make that big left-hand turn, then the right-hand turn, and another left-hand turn, we run right into Aiken Road, right? So when you're standing at Aiken Road, what do you see? Cows? Horses? Hay? Farms? Okay, well, we like to get on an application called Logic. If you have never heard of Logic, L-O-J-I-C, I recommend you do. Logic is great. It'll allow you to pinpoint any lot you want. It'll allow you to zoom down to that, see the lot, find the owner, get the PVA value assessment, how big it is, all of that information. So we do that all the time. And when we found, driving along and coming to that intersection at Aiken Road, we found 2 pieces of property, 14 acres. And those 14 acres are owned by an LLC called Rye Cara. So you go to the Secretary of State's website, you look up RICARE, you find out who the members are, you get some names, then you do the same thing, you look up their names, you find out who other LLCs they're tied to, and lo and behold, person involved with this property, RICARE, is a Ryan and a Kara, okay? The children of the D in LDG. So they own those 14 acres right there, so it all boils back to LDG, okay? Again, what can you do on 14 acres? A lot. And then just another couple of simple examples. Everybody know where Aiken, again, we're at Aiken Road right here. This whole subdivision, that was originally planned to be 800 homes. Okay, that's a lot of houses. Well, we got a letter back in May from their attorneys basically saying that they wanted to adjust that proposal. And what it says here now is that the applicant is now proposing 174 units consisting of attached patio homes and townhomes, instead of the original 83 single-family homes that they had planned. So what was 800 homes is now 900 homes, and come back in, another month or two, and it'll be 1,000 homes. Okay, so that's just to give you an idea of what's changing. And if that wasn't bad enough, everybody been following 1614 Johnson Road? Everybody know what that was all about? 1614 Johnson Road was an MRDI subdivision, we'll talk about that later, right up Johnson Road. Portion of it built in the floodplain. So for the better part of 2 years, that's been going back and forth to Metro Council. About 2 weeks ago, Metro Council finally approved 1614 Johnson Road. 80 homes, 80 apartment units, okay? Those are directly across the street from one of the entrances to the polo fields. And what's gonna happen when they open up those 80 homes and 80 apartments? Well, according to the Institute of Traffic Engineers, the Institute of Transportation Engineers, they basically give you a number. And they say if you have so many apartments and so many single-family homes, you're gonna generate so many car trips. That one subdivision alone creates 1,354 car trips on Johnson Road. You all know what Johnson Road's like today. You know what the intersection looks like at Johnson Road. We talked about the turn lanes. That's one. And then not 5 days later, or maybe it was earlier, 2200 Eastwood Fisherville Road, another subdivision, was approved by the Planning Commission. So this is just to show you all the stuff that's going on right there in the open now, okay? Any questions about that so far? All right. I'm gonna ask you to hang with me here. This will all take you somewhere. Anybody ever heard of by right development? By right development. Okay, by right development is not buy it at the right price. By right development means by legal right you are able to. And what does it really say? So, by right development, also referred to as right of development in some parts of the United States, is the easiest path to qualify for development under the zoning and building codes of local jurisdictions. By right approvals are also described as ministerial, a common legal term that also describes a lack of discretionary approval. What does that mean? Basically, it means if a developer comes up with a plan and goes to that land development code book, remember the big book we talked about? You go through the 1,000 pages, and they meet all the minimum requirements of the land development code. When they go to the planning commission, basically the planning commission has no legal right to say no. Their process becomes a ministerial process, meaning it's a rubber stamp, and they have no discretionary input. So when 1614 Johnson that we just talked about, built partly in the floodplain, introducing all that traffic, nobody got to talk about safety. Nobody got to talk about traffic. It wasn't even allowed in the last meeting to be a discussion point because there's nothing they can do about it. They don't have any input in the process, no discretionary input. By becoming a home rule city, the last person to make the sign-offs on any new project would be the city of Eastwood. And as such, the city of Eastwood would have discretionary input in the process, okay? We are not a ministerial function. We would be an advisory function, a sign-off function. That's important. Okay, now we gotta whip out the glasses here. Everybody know who Anthony Piagentini is? Anthony Piagentini is one of our 3 councilmen. So you have Anthony, who is for the most part councilman north of Shelbyville Road. Stuart Benson is one of our councilmen to the south of Shelbyville Road, and I believe is Notting Hills and Locust Creek. And Kevin Kramer, pretty much the core of Eastwood, all the way toward Plainview. Okay, so they're your 3 folks. So Anthony Piagentini, one of our councilmen, in his newsletter dated June 28th, 2024, said, I quote, "I have concerns with some of the ideas that are being shared, such as by right zoning," which we talked about, "which allows higher density housing in R4 zoned areas, or the elimination of single family zoning." Let me say that again. Or the elimination of single family zoning. Okay? So here's one of the documents I was telling you we're going to get from a magazine. Here's Louisville Business First. It says, development professionals say streamlined approval process needed to spur growth. So the builders are basically saying it's too hard today to do business. They want us to make it even easier for them. All right. They refer to Louisville's land development code as archaic. What does archaic mean? It means old, old-fashioned, right? Okay. So in the article, here's a picture. This is a picture of a gentleman, the Executive Director of Economic Development for Louisville Metro, okay? Director of Economic Development for Louisville Metro. And he's putting together a panel so that they can have a panel discussion examining land use code reform in Louisville Metro. What's reform mean? To change. So let's call it what it is. They have a panel to discuss and examine land use code changes in Louisville Metro. Now we have a little picture in the article. It shows all the folks that are on the panel, some of them. This gentleman right here, anybody want to take a guess at what company that gentleman works with or for? LDG. Be brave, tell the truth. That's right, LDG. So we have somebody from LDG, one of the nation's largest builders of apartment complexes, in the planning discussion to talk about land development code reform. Next, Mr. O'Brien, who is the Executive Director for Economic Development in Louisville, said, the city would like to modify the code to allow for middle housing like duplexes, triplexes, cottage courts, and townhouses to be built on property zoned exclusively for single-family homes. They're telling you right there exactly what their plans are. The plan is to take R4 zone property as you know it today, okay, and convert it to basically anything they want to. All right. In your little pamphlets, for those that have one, there's a little document here on middle housing, okay? So we're going to pick it up here and you'll see how this all ties together. So it talks about question number 1, middle housing. And remember, this is a document from Louisville Metro. This is not anything we made up. We're just taking the information that's provided. And it says, what is zoning? Okay, it says the middle housing draft regulations are an amendment to the land development code that would allow duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, townhouses, cottage courts, and walking courts throughout the residential areas of Louisville Metro. The LDC, the Land Development Code of Metro, currently prohibits these building types in most areas. So the law must be changed to allow it. Okay, they're being honest, they're telling you what they're going to do. Second question, under the proposed regulations, will middle housing require a change in zoning? And the answer is no. So think about that. No zoning required. So theoretically, a builder could buy a piece of property, R4 property, without going through a zoning change process and build a duplex, a triplex, a quad, a townhouse, an apartment, whatever, wherever they want. Okay? The last question. Will middle housing be allowed in small cities with zoning authority, such as Shively and Middletown? And this is the big answer. The answer is no. Okay, what does that mean? That means that those 12 cities that we talked about in the beginning that have zoning authority do not have to adopt these changes to Louisville Metro's Land Development Code. But if they make those changes, and they're going to in April of 25, When they do that, if we are not incorporated, we will fall under all those new rules and reforms. Everybody understand that? If we incorporate and become a home rule city with zoning authority, we will dictate what changes, where, when, how, okay? We're not saying we don't want middle housing, or that middle housing is a bad idea. Middle housing is a great idea. On Bardstown Road, as an example, right? Bardstown Road, north or south, you've got lots of buildings that would be great for fourplexes. But what happens to the people who live there? They go down the stairs, they step outside, they're on a sidewalk. They walk 2 blocks on a sidewalk, what do they run into? TARC, public transportation. They can get to CVS, they can get to the drugstore, they can get to Kroger's, they can go to the bank, okay? We have I have a sister-in-law who is on Social Security disability, lives in an affordable housing unit. She lives right off of, doesn't own a car. She lives her life, everything is good, all right? So there's an opportunity to do something like that. Does it make sense to do that on Flat Rock Road, out in the boonies, where there's no public transportation, no sidewalks, no job opportunities, no food, nothing? So who are you helping? All right.
The developers.
So, keep going. In your little pamphlets, you're going to see a map. Looks like that. And the map is really just to show the types of houses we're talking about on the bottom. So those are your duplexes, triplexes, quads, 4s, apartment units. You look at the map. So all white buildings, well, those are all the single-family houses. Those are all R4 property single-family houses. And then all the blue buildings, well, those are all the middle housings that are popping up all over the place. So believe me, they can be across the street from you, can be next door. You're sitting on a 5-acre lot somewhere on Flat Rock Road, developer comes in, buys it, next thing you know, you got a townhouse next door. Okay, now, what is one thing that we have absolutely not even talked about with all this development that we did talk about? Traffic, infrastructure, roads, have we even talked about it? They haven't either. That's the problem. This one here, that's in your pamphlets. This is a map, and basically a map that shows middle housing opportunities. The middle of the page, that's the Snyder. And if you look right smack in the middle of the page, you see like a little white triangle right there. A little white triangle. The little white triangle is actually a part of Middletown. Okay, so people don't realize it, but Middletown extends just beyond the Snyder. To the left on your piece of paper, let's put it the right way, here you go. To the right, east of the Snyder, see all those pretty colors? You got yellows, and you've got pinks, and you got blues, and you got greens. Those represent, look at the legend on the side here, those represent the different types of middle housing opportunities you would have in those areas. That's us, okay? That's us. You look to the other side, you see a lot of white. Why is that? Including Middletown over here. Why is it white? Because that's J-Town, that's Middletown, that's Anchorage, that's Linden, that's Douglas Hills. Those are all your cities with home rule city with zoning authority. That they can't tell you what's going to be allowed there because the cities hasn't told anybody yet. They may not allow any. I suspect they will do what we would do, which is adopt the new regulations with restrictions, like where you can do it, when you can do it. Maybe like when we have a traffic infrastructure to support it. Maybe when we have a police department that can handle another 1,000 dwellings that we don't have today. All right, so it's not saying no. It's saying we want input into the process. And then the last picture, again, this is probably the last one in your little book there. I know cartoonish stuff, you know, sometimes people get offended. To me, this is real straightforward. The top, that's the view of Eastwood that we envision. That's what we have today. Right? That's your R4 properties. Below it, that's what the developers want. Okay, that's it. That's their 3, 4-story apartment complex, townhouses, cottage courts, everything. That's what they want. All right. Now, just so everybody understands, we've got folks out there that don't want us to do this. Okay, we already kind of established who those folks might be. They come up with little documents every now and then. And I just wanted to share one. They say, fact, there are already plenty of ways for you to influence the direction of our community. Does anybody really believe that? Well, but they gave us examples, so we have to listen. First example is HOAs. So, you all live in a complex that has an HOA. Do you have any authority, or does your HOA have any authority outside the boundaries of that subdivision?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not. None. Next one, they said Metro Council. Oh, Metro Council can save the day for us. Okay. There are currently 26 council people on the Louisville Metro Council. We have how many that represent our area?
3.
3. So, do they have a whole lot of authority even if they wanted to?
No.
No. But, just to be clear, I wrote a question to one of our other council people, Stuart Benson, got a response. And it says basically, if the changes pass Metro Council, the changes, meaning the land development code reform and things like middle housing, those changes, then the council people would have no vote in upcoming proposed middle housing proposals. Why is that? Because they don't require zoning change. So if they don't require zoning change, Louisville Metro Council doesn't even get involved. It's just a done deal, okay? And their last thing that was state legislature. Now this one I agreed with. The state legislature, yes, did help us on this one. Why? Because it's the state legislators, including folks like John Hodgins and Mr. Nemes, and they are the ones, and Julie Rocky Adams, thank you. These are the folks who wrote House Bill 388 that allowed us to even petition to become a home rule city in the first place. So I do agree with them on that one. All right. So we talked about a lot of stuff. The last part I want to just bring up, again, this is right from, this is hot off the press. These are proposed changes to the land development code for factory-built housing. So here's an example of where we're not just talking about stick-built houses. We're talking about factory-built houses and making sure that some of those houses have maximum widths of 15 feet. Why? So they can be put on a trailer. They can be driven on the interstate from point A to point B. So here it talks about general capability standards, chapter 4, factory-built housing. The original document, I'm going to read this to you. The original document read, the following standards are applicable to all factory-built housing homes. The structure shall be permanently attached to a permanent foundation system and shall be anchored in accordance with the state standards set forth in KRS yada yada. That was the way it was written. Their changes say, the structure shall be, they struck out the word permanently. The structure shall be attached to a permanent foundation system and shall be, they struck out the word anchored and said, and shall be installed and inspected in accordance with the state standards. So what they're telling you is, this house could be built 13, 15 feet wide, transported, put on a foundation. Somebody could come along and pick it up and move it somewhere else, put it on another foundation. There's nothing that would stop them from doing that, okay? So I'm just telling you what it's, remember, this is what is written. I didn't make this stuff up. All right. Any other questions about it? Home rule cities, zoning authority, how important it is to us, middle housing, land development code reform, things like MRDI, haven't talked much about it. MRDI is basically an incentive program to allow developers to build higher densities on R4 property by saying, we will build single-family homes and we will build some apartment complexes because that makes it financially advantageous for us to do so, but we have to have some percentage, I think it's 5, affordable housing units. So if you're going to build 200 homes and or apartments, 5%, like 10. So as long as I have 10, I'm allowed to do this, okay? So is 10 going to solve our problem? I don't know, but that's the rules that they use. So any opportunity to find land and increase its density is their objective, okay? Again, no traffic infrastructure to be discussed, no additional policing to be discussed. All right, so we're okay with that. I'm going to shift gears a little bit. We're going to talk about services. All right. So, does everybody know who John Hodgson is?
Yes,
If you don't know who John Hodgson is, there's a picture of him, this big burly guy. You don't mess with John. John is our state representative in District 36. Okay. So he did an interview to talk about this project back in January. And he said, the city annexed us. City of Louisville annexed us, meaning back in 2003 when we did the merger. Increased our taxes and basically reduced our services from what we were getting, he said. The area outside the Waterson Expressway provides 80% of the tax dollars in metro government and gets less than half of the services. Think about that. We provide 80% of the revenue, we get less than 50% of the services. Doesn't sound fair. In 2020, pursuant to another House bill, Louisville Metro put a group of folks together, some real smart people, and said, we're gonna start a commission and we're gonna look at the effects of the merger. And we're gonna find out if the merger was good for us, bad for us, indifferent. Let's get some facts. So they set up meetings. And the meetings were all over the town, and they invited the public to come in and give their input. All right? And while it's great reading, and it really is, I'm gonna focus on just one thing. The commission acknowledges that Louisville Metro Police Department services are not adequately provided across the county. That's us. It must be acknowledged that there are wide areas of the county that are simply not receiving police services that their tax dollars pay for. The commission acknowledges that many of these underserved areas have contracted with other police departments or with off-duty police officers to provide police services their tax dollars should already be providing them. Does anybody disagree with that? I mean, how often do we see a Louisville Metro police officer drive through our subdivisions just to drive through the subdivision? LMPD Division 8 is stretched thin. You realize their area is basically all the way from Prospect by the river, all the way down to Fisherville. It's close to 90 square miles with 47 beat officers, okay? Stretched thin, underfunded. They don't have the resources to take care of this area. All those resources that Louisville Metro needs, well, they're gonna be in the higher crime districts. Sure, I understand that. If you lived in Division 1 High Crime District of Louisville has one police officer for every 374 residents. If you live in Division 3 in the Shively area, it's one officer for every 1,000 residents. If you live in Division 8, it's one officer for every 2,900 residents. Understand they need more services in the higher crime district, get it. But you're still paying your taxes. You still expect to get services, right? So, one of the key proposals of this entire project is to create our own police department. And when I say that, you know, people will come back and they'll say, oh, you can't do it, it costs too much, you never be able, you know, you won't have many. We're gonna start a small police department. Obviously, we understand in its infancy, day one, we're not gonna have a police department like Middletown or J-Town. Let's be real. We'll focus on getting started, and every year we'll grow, and at some point we'll become a Prospect. And then after that, we'll look at becoming a Middletown. This is something that's gonna evolve over time. But what's the objective? The objective is to be able to look at these maps and say, if I have a police officer whose job it is to just drive around in this area, and I have another one whose job it is to drive around in this area, it's a high visibility deterrence to have police officers driving around in their vehicles. We want to see police officers in the area. Everybody drive from here and they go to Shelby County, drive down Shelbyville Road, right? We all do it. Driving down Shelbyville Road, having the time of our lives, right? Going 60 miles an hour, waving at the cows, life is good, and then we get to Simpsonville. And what's the first thing we do in Simpsonville?
Hit the brakes.
Hit the brakes, slow down, but fast, right? Because if you go in there and you're doing 39, they'll pull you over. Ask my son, he'll vouch for me, all right? So, slow down, you slow down fast. Why? Because you know they're there. You know they're serious, and you respect the law. We want the same thing. We want people to know we have a police presence. And it's a police presence that is dedicated to the area, not traveling from here to Goose Creek, to Fisherville, to Anchorage. No, we want to know they're in our area. Okay, now, People who oppose us will sit there and they'll say, oh, these guys are full of baloney, all right? Middletown has 20 officers and 5.8 square miles and a $2.3 million budget. And that's how much, that's what they need. And you're proposing, 4 full-time and 3 part-time officers, and you've got 18 and a half square miles to patrol. Can't do it, can't happen, never happen. Doesn't make sense. Well, here's the reality. You don't talk to the developers and the builders or PR firms, right? You go and talk to the police people. So you talk to the Middletown Police Department, and you go talk to Shogley, and you go talk to Prospect. You go talk to J-Town. You say, tell me the truth, what does it mean? And they go, well, first thing you do is you never look at an area by square mile and dictate how many police officers you have. You start looking at people. You say, let's look at the transient population of Middletown. What happens to the transient population of Middletown during the day and early evening? It doubles, maybe even triples. Why is that? Because people work there. People shop there. People go to dinner there. Okay? What happens to the transient population during the day and early evening in Eastwood? It goes down. Why is that? Because we're the ones that are going to work. We're the ones that are going shopping. We're the ones that are going to eat dinner. Okay? Common sense. Different kinds of requirements. They have a police officer that has to stay in the area to take care of Hagen Apartments, to take care of Target, to take care of Walmart, to take care of Petco. We don't have any of that. We just want a police officer who will burn a lot of gas. I'll give you that. We want them moving around. They're in the area. Because there's no place from here to there that I can't get to in 5 minutes. From here to there, 5 minutes. The objective is for us to have a police presence that's dedicated to us, so when you pick up the phone, that phone call goes to MetroSafe. MetroSafe sends it over to the sheriff's department who says, this address is Eastwood. They pick up the phone and they dispatch an Eastwood police officer who's going to be anywhere in this area to get to where you need to be in 5 minutes. Why is that important? Why is response time important? It makes sense. Everybody knows response time is important. Why? The probability of a domestic violence situation going from 2 people yelling at each other to somebody getting really hurt is a function of how fast a police officer can get there to defuse the situation. Okay? Response times. If there is a crime committed, if a police officer can get to the crime site within 5 minutes, study after study after study tells you this. They go and start talking to people. In 5 minutes, you still remember how tall the person was. You still remember something about the car. You might have caught part of their plate. Okay? It's amazing what ATF and LMPD can do with information. You get there in 45 minutes, you've been in a stressful situation, you're nervous, you're scared. You're lucky if you remember what time of day it is. You're lucky if you remember what day it is. All right? So response time is everything. That's what we want to accomplish. All right? Everybody okay with that? Does anybody feel like policing is not important in this area? Remember what we talked about? Apartments, a lot of apartments, houses, MRDI subdivision 64. That's a lot of head count. Along with head count comes crime. It's just the natural progression of life. Okay? All right. Now we're going to talk about some more fun stuff. Anybody ever hear of local government premium taxes? Local government premium taxes. You know about them right now, right? Okay. Local government premium tax is something that everyone in this room pays today. You pay it on every insurance premium that you have. So on your house, on your car, on your boat, on your motorcycle, on your RV, whatever, you pay an additional 5% within your insurance premium. It's cooked in there. Okay? So every month you write your check to your insurance provider, that check goes to them, and every quarter they take that money and they find out what taxing district it goes to, and they say, oh, Bob's address goes to Louisville Metro, that money goes to Louisville Metro. Remember I told you in the beginning there were 82 cities or 82 taxing districts? Each one of those 82 taxing districts gets that local government premium tax back to their city, not Metro. So if we incorporate and become the city of Eastwood, our 5%, which is all our insurance premiums, that 5% gets routed back to the city of Eastwood, not Louisville. Okay. Just as an example, if we took this entire proposed area and got the entire proposed area, that money could amount to anywhere from like 1.6 to $2 million. That comes to the city of Eastwood. That helps fund the police department day one. Okay? It's automatic. All right. Municipal road aid. Municipal road aid from Kentucky Transportation Cabinet. Today, the Transportation Cabinet sends money to Louisville Metro. Louisville Metro uses that money to work on roads like Shelbyville Road. State doesn't take care of it. They give money to Louisville. Louisville takes care of it. If we become a home rule city, we are going to get funds, municipal road assistance, funds from KYTC to the city of Eastwood. It's not a lot of money. It might be $250,000 in the beginning. It might be $300,000 in the beginning. Whatever it is, that's money that we're going to use exclusively for simple road repairs, sidewalks. So potholes, you have a pothole in front of your street, you don't call Louisville Metro anymore. You call the city of Eastwood, and the Public Works Department there fixes it. You have a sidewalk. Sidewalks are a priority. So raised sidewalks, trip hazards, priorities. Why? People trip, people get hurt, we don't want that. You have a problem with a sidewalk in front of your house, you pick up the phone, you call City of Eastwood, their Public Works Department. That's what those funds are intended to be. Now they'd be augmented by money from our budget, but that's a contribution. Let's talk about traffic studies. Today, when a developer comes in and decides to put a plan together, they're going to submit to the Planning Commission. One of the things they will tend to do is a planning study. They'll do a planning study to try to show the limited impact of this new project on traffic. So what does the developer do? They hire an attorney, and the developer and the attorney hire somebody to do the traffic study. In the last 10 years that I can look back, 90-some-odd% of the traffic studies are all done by the same firm, by the same person, and they are funded by the developers. So let me get sure everybody understands this. Developer is going to fund the traffic study so that somebody from the traffic study can come back and say, there's minimal impact on the road and traffic infrastructure because of this project. Really? So by becoming a home rule city, part of the plan is, when somebody has a new development, we know it's going to have to come in front of the city of Eastwood anyway, we're going to do a traffic study. We're going to hire somebody independently, somebody from QK4 or somebody from the University of Kentucky. And we're going to say, we want you to do the traffic study. Okay, they can do theirs, but we want you to do one as well. Oh, but when you do it, we want to make sure you get input from the community. Not just look at what you think people are doing in their driving patterns, because that's what they do, they create models. We want you to actually go and talk, knock on the door, talk to people who live on Long Run and say, do you get up in the morning and go to work? Do you go north or do you go south? What time do you come home? Do you come home from the north or south? Get input from the people who travel on the roads, common sense stuff. Okay, build your model, come up with your answer. And that's the traffic studies we're going to look at. Because remember, as a home rule city with zoning authority, we're going to be able to look at those traffic studies and we're going to be able to say, we have capacity limits on our roads now. This traffic study says you're going to exceed those capacity limits. Oldham County does this. And if that exceeds it, well, you're going to have to find a way to fix that. Either fix the roads or make your subdivision smaller. All right. Solid waste. Let's talk about solid waste proposal. Everybody know how much they pay today for their solid waste, their garbage pickup. You guys know how much you pay for your garbage pickup annually? Roughly?
$278.
$300 a month.
Oh, probably. Hopefully not that much.
$270 a year.
$270 a year. Okay. Do you have any? How much? $300 a year. That's what we use that as the average. $300 a year. Everybody okay with that? $300 a year. All right. So the proposal here is that we're going to go to the big 5 providers. We're going to say we want a contract. It's for the area, the city of Eastwood. We want to make sure that the contract, when you bring it back to us and you bid, that you are equal to or better than the lowest rate we currently have from anybody in the area. Right now, that might be Locust Creek, it might be Polo Fields, I don't know, but they're in that $160, $170 range, okay? They're gonna have to match that at least. But the key is, we, the city of Eastwood, are going to pay for your garbage pickup out of the taxes that we're going to talk about next, okay? So you're not gonna be paying them anymore, not directly to your provider, not through your HOAs. I mean, they're gonna have to understand you're already getting those services now through the taxes that you pay. All right, everything I've talked about so far is the good stuff. right? We're talking about zoning authority, having control, a voice over what's gonna happen, a police department, and garbage getting picked up, MRA funds, and your local government premium tax. Great. So now comes the bad news. Remember, the guys with the big signs are telling you don't sign because of the big tax. Okay, so let's talk about what it really amounts to. The tax rate that we're going to use for the new city of Eastwood would be 0.134. Why 0.134? Because that's what Middletown is using right now, and we're going to use Middletown as the model. Most of the other cities are higher. Okay, so it would actually be one of the lower tax rates of a home rule city. 0.134. What does that mean? You take your PVA assessed value of your property, you divide it by 100, and you multiply by 0.134, you get a number. Okay. In practical terms, what does that mean? If you have, and I'm giving you an example, if you own a $400,000 home, PVA assessed value $400,000, take that, divide by 100 times 0.134, your tax bill for the year from the city of Eastwood would be $536. $536. However, your net out-of-pocket expense for the year, because we're going to use $300 as the average, you're not paying that anymore. So your $536 minus the $300 you've been paying, your net increment year over year is $236, period. So for people who live in Brookfield, Windover, as an example, whose houses probably fall in that $400,000 range, and I can assure you are paying $300 for their garbage. This is a sweet deal. Now, if you live in an expensive home, in Locust Creek as an example, and you've got one of the best deals on garbage today, your differential is not going to be as good. Yes, that's absolutely true. So if you're living in a $800,000 house, you're going to pay $1,000 in taxes minus your $160,000, you're going to be in the $850 range. Yes. So there are those that do and those that don't. That's the way the world is. Okay? But that's your taxes. That's your mean, nasty, big tax number. Now, people are sitting there going, okay, I know how that works. You're going to give us that tax rate this year. Next year it's going to double. Year after that it's going to double, right? That's what everybody's thinking. All right, so we're going to talk about the law. The law is very simple in this. The law says a city revenue, property tax revenue cannot grow year over year more than 4%. Let me say that again. Revenue generated from the real estate tax for the city cannot grow more than 4% year over year. Okay? Now, what happens if the PVA comes in and they say, we're going to take this section right here and it's time for their 4-year reevaluation. All right, everybody knows every 4 years we get hit. Right? They come knocking on our door for more money. How do they do that? They raise your assessed value. If they do that 1 year, and we recalculate our revenue using the new PVA assessed values, if we calculate that revenue grew year over year by more than 4%, we have to lower our tax rate. Well, the compensating tax rate. Okay, and you're saying, baloney, you're never going to lower the tax rate. Okay, well, what I'll ask you to do is when you go home later, go get your tax returns for 2021, 2022, 2023 as examples. You look at those 3 years. In 2021, your tax rate to Louisville Metro was 0.1289. Okay? Go look at it for 2023. Your tax rate was 0.0124. Went down. Why did it go down? It went down because Louisville Metro made more revenue dollars somewhere in that year, and they had to lower their compensated tax rate to keep that. All right, everybody understand that? All right, and then the next question everybody says is, well, this all sounds really great. Tax rate is X, it can only grow this much. How is the city ever going to grow? We want more police officers over time. We're going to want bigger things. How are we going to do that? Well, then we go to what I refer to as the good news, bad news map. On this map, we see the Sweeney Farm, LDG stuff, and there's Publix, and MRDI over here, 800 homes. And we look over here. Here's the East End Middle School right there, surrounded by 600 homes over there, okay? Most of those are done deals, okay? Well, what does this revenue, what does this generate for us? These 600 homes right here, when they're all built out in the 2 to 5 year plan, that's $700,000 to $750,000 of revenue to the city of Eastwood. Why? Property tax, and don't forget, local government premium tax. So those are both in there. So every one of these good news, bad news turns into revenue for us at that point. Example, the Sweeney property. Remember those 26 acres that are gonna become 380 apartments? That 26-acre piece of property today is PVA valued at $285,000. I mean, I'd run out and go buy that right now. $285,000, which generates bupkis in revenue. But when you put 380 apartments and you develop that land, that becomes 30 or 40 million dollars worth of value. That's what they're gonna be paying property tax on, okay, to us,
That's why we're buying it.
right? Everybody
You think that
understand?
would increase our property value too, and cause us more taxes on the back end?
Yes. So that kind of gives you an idea of the tax structure. It gives you an idea about what it covers, how limited it can grow. Now, remember, when we do that calculation, and I said year over year, 4%, that's exclusive of new development. So every year you have to recalculate exclusive of new development. So you get that new development, you don't have to worry about it for that year. And then on the tax side, I want to make sure everybody understands, it is possible that individually, if your property is one of the properties that gets PVA assessed upwards, your property tax will probably raise that year more than 4%. Right? The 4% is in aggregate for the city of Eastwood. Can't raise it by more than 4%. Everybody understand? Individually, though, you might get hit that 4-year, and then of course, years 2, 3, and 4, it's going to be flat. One of the other things we didn't talk about is if you're old like me, you do have the homestead exemption. Okay, everybody get that tax notice 2 or 3 months ago from our PR firm that doesn't want us to do this, that basically said, here's a tax, announcement, and they told you what your tax would be. Well, that's great. They told you what their tax would be, but they didn't look to see if you were over 65, which I was, so you took some money off of that. They also never wanted to talk about your garbage. They failed to mention that part. So as an example, my tax bill when I got it from them, that nasty little notice, said we were gonna pay $818, okay, for the year, okay? So I subtracted our homestead exemption, but I also then said, wait a minute, I'm paying $90, a quarter to $360 a year for my garbage. So my $818 went to $750 minus the other two, I ended up paying like $300 differential year over year. I can do that to get a police department and to make sure that we have zoning authority. Yes, I'll take that anytime. That's a good deal. Okay. So, with that said, any other questions that I can answer? Yes, sir.
Did the enabling legislation provide any guidance to the cities in terms of how they be governed?
No, there's no guidance on how they would be governed. Our plan is we would be governed under a mayor and council. So it would be mayor and 4 council people. And the plan, day one, so let me talk about the process.
Commission.
What's that?
Are you thinking commission or council?
Council, sorry. Did I say commission? Council.
No, you said council.
Council, okay.
Okay.
So the plan, once we get the right number of signed petitions from the community, we have to take those signed petitions and we have to deliver them to Louisville Metro. Louisville Metro has 60 days to review those. And they will, in 60 days, go through every one of them if they can to throw out as many as possible. Why? One, they don't want to lose the local government premium tax. Okay, a couple $1 million on a $1 billion budget, not going to hurt their feelings. But they really don't want us to have zoning authority. That upsets the apple cart. That ruins their plans. Okay? Zoning authority is everything. It's why those signs went up. Okay, it wasn't because it was the local government premium tax. All right. Once that goes to the Louisville Metro and within 60 days, when they're done, if we still have the number needed, then it goes to circuit court. And in circuit court, a judge will basically appoint the government. Now, what will probably happen is the government would be appointed based on the folks who put the plan together in the first place. So the people who are on the committee who've been spending the last year and a half to get this accomplished would probably be your starting government day one. You would have a mayor, and you would have your 4 council people. It would start with council people geographically separated and with the right backgrounds. We're going to want an attorney. We're going to want somebody with financial background, a CIO or COO of a company. We're going to want somebody with some planning and zoning background. Okay, so those kind of folks would be your commission, and your council, and your mayor in the beginning. That would last until your first formal election period. The formal election period comes, you'll get their voted positions. Okay, one thing I will tell you, because I always hear this too, if you want to look at the budget, you can see it online, but one thing I wanted to let you know, the mayor and the 4 council people, these are non-salary positions, okay? Non-salary positions. In the beginning, that's not what this is about. It's not about anybody making money. It's about getting this thing accomplished. Down the road, the public will get to decide whether they are entitled to make any money or not, and even then, it's capped by state legislation. It's not a whole lot of money.
So would you have to have residents?
You would have to have residents.
So a developer could
No, but a
be brought
developer's,
in?
no, but a developer's friend could.
What do you have?
So,
What do you have?
do you have to have residents to be on to be a councilman, or the mayor? And the answer is yes. But yes, of course, at that point, everybody have to be careful who they're voting for down the road. So, yes, ma'am.
You cited collecting the right number of signatures?
Yes.
Is that, I remember doing some research on it, is that 60% of the residents you have to reach?
Okay, so the legislation changed this year. It was originally, we needed 65% of all registered voters in the proposed area. It is now, we need 75% of a number equal to the number of votes cast in the last presidential election in the proposed area. Okay, so what that means is, we will not have the number needed by this until this election comes and goes. So after this election period, we will go back to the State Board of Elections, get the data, and they will tell us exactly how many votes were cast by individual precincts. That's going to be the number we start. We're going to need 75% of that. So if it's 10,000 votes cast, we need 7,500 signed petitions.
So do you have like a progress to goal on where you're at with signatures?
We believe we're somewhere in the low 2,200, 2,300 so far. It has not gone as quickly as we would like.
And what is the deadline?
There is no statutory deadline. We would like to have it done by January so that we can go through the entire process and become a home rule city prior to April 15th, 2025. Why April 15th, 2025? Because if Louisville Metro has its way, that's when the new land development code reform laws would go into effect. The only reason, so everybody understands, the only reasons they are not in effect today is because, again, state legislators, and the driver was primarily Julie Rocky Adams, our state senator for District 36, passed a moratorium for 1 year that no changes could be made to land development code anywhere, because they wanted to make sure that everybody had the time to understand what this meant. Because the impact of this is major change. This is not a little change. This is huge. Remember, 70, 80, probably 90 some odd % of the land east of the Snyder, is R4 property. It's protected, okay? This will basically do away with R4 protections, period. Okay, so every piece of property is free game. Okay. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
So who will do the property evaluation, the city or
The PVA.
PDA?
Yes, PVA, we have nothing to do with the property evaluation stuff. That's gonna be
So who do they report to?
PVA?
Yeah.
For the most part,
City,
yes.
state,
State.
metro?
Yeah, I think state actually. I think it's a revenue driven. But we have nothing to do with it. I mean, the PVA assesses your properties, gives the information to us, and your taxes are based on that number, not on anything that we would do. Yes, sir.
So the signature threshold that was changed, seems like it probably works in our favor, perhaps. 'Cause
It should have worked.
voter turnout is generally less than the general population.
So here's what happened. It's very interesting. In 2020, the presidential election, everybody told us, you're lucky if you have precincts that'll get you 50%, 55% turnout. You'll be lucky. Well, unfortunately, in our end of town, the voting precincts were averaging 65, 66. We had one precinct at 69%. So the 2020 election was incredibly high. So what we do know is our population out here has grown. We probably have more registered voters, but we won't know until after the election whether our base number went up or went down. For all we know, everybody's sick and tired of this election and maybe not even show up. Or we'll have a hurricane and nobody shows up, and the number of votes cast in the last presidential election will be very, very low, making our job significantly easier. So, I didn't say don't vote, remember, I just,
Right.
all right. Yes, sir.
Going back to earlier, you said this property could change like to $40 million or whatever. Wouldn't that essentially drop the cost of our property too, cause us to pay more taxes on the back end versus what they're saying on the signs? You would think that if that property goes to $40 million, across the street from it, that property value as well. So
You
we
mean
pay
if-
more taxes on our side.
If the property across the street with more apartments,
Yeah.
well, it could, but what's gonna happen to your single-family home value that's across the street when your folks can't get out of their driveway anymore?
True.
You know, there comes a point in time where traffic becomes a driver of people's property value when it becomes virtually unlivable. All right, so there's a livability quotient there that people have to consider. It started going back in time when you started looking at, look at Dixie Highway. I mean, they've put a lot of money into Dixie Highway. It's still bumper to bumper, right? But at least they've made some improvements. If you look at our area, yeah, we widened Waterson. But what's happened east of the Snyder? What has happened out here? Nothing. I think John Hodgins put it best. He said, well, they basically took dirt roads, then we put some gravel on them, then we smeared a little bit of asphalt over it, and we called it a road. Well, it's the same roads that we had back in, the 1900s. All those farms that are in Shelby, in our county, east of the Snyder, they're farms today. Farmer passes away, family doesn't want to be involved in the business anymore. Next thing you know, somebody's cutting them a $3 or $4 million check, and that's becoming a 350, home subdivision. Great. Farm became subdivision. Problem is, farm roads are still the same farm roads. We just put asphalt on them, but they're no wider, they're no bigger. There's a livability issue when it goes too far.
Of the examples, the development projects you mentioned,
Mhm.
are all of those like fully baked, like done deals essentially, corporations?
No. No. So for example, I would say, yes, the Hagen properties, that's a done deal. I would say that this property right here, around the middle school, that's a done deal. Now, here's what's interesting. This is scheduled and has been approved by the planning commission for 600 homes, okay, as it is. But remember, if April comes and land development code reform gets passed and we are not incorporated, theoretically, the developer can go back to the plans and say, you know what, instead of 600 single-family homes, I'm gonna do 400 single-family homes, and I'm gonna take the space that I had for the other ones, and I'm gonna do 800 apartment complexes, or 600. So all of a sudden, 600 dwellings now became 1,000 dwellings. Well, okay, what does that mean? That's 1,000 more cars. Remember with Institute of Traffic Engineers? How many additional trips per, car do you add in the quotient when you start talking about those kind of numbers of apartments? And I mean, it's just astronomical. All right. Any other questions? So I want to thank you all. I really do appreciate it for coming out. If you are interested in signing the petition, we have them in the back. If you want to become a canvasser and go throughout your neighborhood, we've got canvasser packs. We'd love for you to do the same thing, knock on your neighbor's doors. Ask them to go on. We ask one of these, tell them to go to the website. The website, we have a new website, EIC-info, made it easier for people to see. Tell your neighbors to go to the website, because there's lots of questions on there. So Q&A section, there's a did you know section, and tell them if they have a question, just email us, info@cityofeastwood.com. We answer the questions, okay? We love questions. It tells us people are thinking about it. Anything else? All right. Thanks again. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.